Welcome to the COSME Astrology Podcast. I am your astrologer and host, Lisa Warman. In today's episode, episode 11, I'm sitting with astrologer and licensed mental health counselor, Jonah Emerson-Bell. In this episode, Jonah and I deep dive into Neptune's ingress into Aries. You're going to receive potent information on how this transit is going to impact you personally, how it's going to impact the collective, and we're also going to deep dive into the history of Neptune in Aries. As always, the COSME Astrology Podcast is recorded with a live studio audience. Stick around for the end to catch the live Q&A from our audience members. This podcast is intended for community. There's so much empowerment, education, and unforgettable conversations that come through when we are in person talking about astrology and wellness. All right, so go ahead, sit back, relax, grab your journal, and enjoy the show. Welcome to the COSME Astrology Podcast. I am your astrologer and host, Lisa Warman, and today I am here with guest astrologer, Jonah Emerson-Bell. So this is episode 11, and today is 11/11. We did not plan this. This happened by no coincidence, as we mentioned.
Yeah, no coincidences in this universe.
Right. But it is 11/11, and this episode is going to be on Neptune's ingress into Aries. So, Jonah, you drove here from Santa Fe. You got here last night. This is your first time at COSME and first time on the podcast. So, one, thank you for being here. And also, why don't you just give the audience, and whether the audience is on YouTube or here, a little context as to who you are, what you do, and when you started practicing.
Yeah, and first, thank you very much for having me here. This is a great honor and a pleasure. I love talking. I love talking about astrology. I love talking about myself. So it's great to be here. I'm an astrologer, tarot reader, and very recently licensed mental health counselor. I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I just graduated from Southwestern College, which is a transpersonal mental health counseling program that's there. I started studying astrology like 7 or 8 years ago during my nodal return, actually. Nice. And a friend of mine who is an astrologer and tarot reader in Nevada City, Amalia Janik, who goes by Hair in the Moon, great astrologer. They brought me to Stephen Forrest's apprenticeship program, and I knew nothing about astrology and got thrown in with people who were talking about the nodes. I had no idea what those were. I didn't know what any of the like funny squiggles meant, or why people kept being like, oh, sorry. And then I was just like, got obsessed with it and was like, I want to figure this out. I want to know this. And I just got bitten by it. The fire got lit, and I've been kind of into it ever since. And, since then, I've been on podcasts. I've had my own podcast with Amalia for a while. Right now, I do a weekly astro weather forecast called This Week in Space. You can find that on YouTube, or I do it live on my Instagram. That's Monday mornings at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. I also have an astrology-themed radio show called The Melee Report, which is all the astro weather you never thought you needed, set to all the music you never thought you would hear. And that comes out weekly when I get a chance to do that. And then, see clients for astrology, tarot, coaching. I just love this work.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, thank you for being here. I am so excited to jump into this conversation because last night we were riffing a little bit. So just so you guys know, I found Jonah's work on the World Wide Web, as a lot of us do nowadays, but we had never met in person. So last night was our first introduction, and Jonah came to our sound bath hosted by myself and the beautiful Adina Diaz. She's in the audience. Hello. And it was funny because we started talking about astrology right away, as astrologers do. And our conversation lasted like an hour and a half, and we were just adding layers and layers and layers onto what we wanted to talk about today. And so we were joking and kind of making a statement that this podcast truly could be a 4-hour podcast. So if you need to go to the bathroom now, go. Just kidding. As mentioned, it's only 60 to 90 minutes, but we have a lot of material to get through because when the outer planets change signs, it is a big deal. And there are a lot of changes that happen. And I'm sure all of you are already feeling this change. But today we're going to talk about Neptune's ingress, like I said, into Aries. We're also going to touch upon Neptune conjunct Saturn in Aries, which is going to happen pretty soon. And Jonah is also going to perform some magic at the end, which I'm really excited about. So this is just kind of an add-on that we threw in. So yes, we're going to go ahead and get started. And before we do that, I'm just wondering, Jonah, do you want to explain a little bit about like how you use astrology in your own life, and if you use it on the daily, or what do you do with astrology aside from see clients?
Yeah, so, because I do a weekly, like 2 weekly forecasts, I'm always sort of checking the astrology and then checking the news, which I kind of wish I didn't have to check the news, to be honest, but it's like part of my responsibility, I think, to see, how do these symbols that work in this 2-dimensional pattern, right, relate to our 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional world, right? How do these manifest? And then I don't really look at my chart so much, except for like times of crisis. Like very recently, I was at the very end of my graduate program, and I was like, I cannot take it anymore. I had like 3 months left. I was like, I need to drop out, right? And I was like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. And then I was like, let me look at my chart real quick. And then I noticed that Saturn was squaring my sun, and I was like, you know what? Like, maybe I'll just like stick it out for a minute, right? Try and learn these Saturnian lessons of dedication and discipline and doing the thing that we set out to do. So that like kind of saved me from a crisis, right? Or a bad mistake, or I don't believe in failure, but that is a way of not showing up for Saturn, right? Is to quit like in the last mile. And also I'm a Sagittarius, right? So it's the like Sagittarian energy of like, I'm done with this, right? The mutable, fiery energy. I want to do what I want to do. And then being like, oh yeah, like this is my relationship that I've been cultivating with Saturn for years, right? The dedication and discipline. Let me see that through. So that's a way that I use it. And then, I've gotten interested in astrological magic. I've always been interested in magic, and astrological magic was something like very mysterious, very like powerful. But I started going to the Astromagia conference, which is started by my friend JD Kelly, and it just like opened the world of astrology to me in a totally different way. It was like the gateway drug that got me into Hellenistic astrology and traditional astrology. But one of the things that I really like about it is that it makes this practice of astrology very living and very animate. And through the astrological magic, I've kind of developed a one-on-one relationship with a lot of the planets and work with them in my daily life and like recognize them, as I move through the world, because like they say, as above, so below, and so below as above, right? So coming into relationship with these archetypal energies and really sort of working with them, right? Because what we do here and what we're doing here today is also impacting what is happening in the celestial realm, as well as like out in the kind of terrestrial realm, right? And this is the sort of beautiful kind of web of life that we get to exist in. And so astrology, and particularly like the astral magic and the animacy of this practice, has really helped me to understand my place in this web of life and my unique thread in the tapestry of life, right? And also how when this thread gets plucked, right, it reverberates outward, right? And so we are all kind of like weaving together in this moment in this tapestry of life, and we are all kind of like touching each other's threads, right? And creating a ripple effect in this tapestry. Right?
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing all of that. And, you guys, if you I know there's professional astrologers out here in the audience, and there's also people who are astrology enthusiasts, students of astrology, new to astrology. So if you are new, just know that astrology can be something you can use in your day-to-day life. I personally do look at my chart quite often. I don't know why, but I do. And it really does help me with my life, with my finances, with some important decisions, just with seasons, actually. So if you feel called to it, we can talk after the show. There's a lot of ways to be able to look at your chart and also consult a professional astrologer.
Reminded me of one more thing, right?
Yeah.
I think also the beauty of astrology is it helps to make sense of the senseless. Right? The sort of like chaos of the world, or why is this happening, or what does this mean, right? And maybe this is my Sagittarian perspective, right? Which is trying to make meaning of all of the information and come up with like an all-encompassing story, right? But I think that astrology and the symbolic language of astrology and the archetypal language of astrology really helps us to understand, okay, this is what's happening, and this is how we can do this in a more skillful way, right? This is how we can work with these challenges to learn from them. Like I was saying, with that Saturn squaring my son and almost dropping out of school, and then being like, okay, like this is the lesson that's encoded in this, instead of just being willful and blowing up my life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with my Leo placements, I'm just every day like, okay, what's up for me, so. But all right. So we're going to get into this. But speaking of looking at charts, last night, Jonah and I were in the space and we were talking, and I'm like, hey, have you looked at the chart for tomorrow? And he said no. And I'm like, oh, neither have I. And we both kind of paused for a minute. And then at the same time, we both just said, the nodes are changing signs. And we kind of like, I don't know, jumped. And that's what's happening today. So the nodes, the lunar nodes, have been in Aries and Libra. They have changed signs now to Virgo and Pisces. So this is a big deal. We're not going to go into it too much, but this has happened. It's about a 2-year, like
year and a half, 18 months.
Yeah. That's how long it is. And then we also have Mars retrograde in Cancer, and that's at 27 degrees. So I know a lot of people have been feeling that. And Mars is a key player in this year's astrology. I mean, when we start talking about Neptune and Aries, you guys will see, but Mars is definitely a key player. Yeah. Do you have anything to say on those, or do you want to just jump into it?
I think the node shifting is like a important thing to talk about just for a moment, right? Because this happens every 18 months or so. And I think it really characterizes the flavor of the story of a year or a time period. I went to a meditation that was led by this dude, Vinny Ferraro, who has big Heart City meditation in San Francisco, and he does an online thing. And, I like to go to the Sangha once in a while when I have time. And the Dharma talk that he was giving was about gratitude, right? In relationship to the fires that are raging in LA and the sort of fear and terror and loss, and one of the things that he was talking about in terms of gratitude was just like being able to create the space in ourselves to hold even this, right? To hold the tragedy, to hold the sorrow, to hold this isn't right, or this isn't the way that I wanted it, right? And I think that's a lot of what the North Node moving into Pisces is, right? Being able to see this bigger picture, right? That doesn't make it okay, right? That LA is burning, or that people lost their houses, or that people are suffering, right? But, to be able to hold even that sorrow in a larger container, right? And I think, one of the ways that we can think about sorrow is like that it doesn't, like grief and sorrow and loss doesn't go down over time. We walk with that for the rest of our life, right? And anyone who has lost a pet or a loved one or a friend knows this, but we increase our capacity to be with it. We can increase the container that holds it. And I think this is one of the lessons that we can receive with the North Node moving into Pisces, is being able to have the space to be like, that's not perfect and that's okay, right? Because the South Node in Virgo is separating, it's dividing, it's analyzing, it's trying to get it just right. And the North Node in Pisces teaches us that like, this too can be okay, right? This too is part of the divine plan. Right?
Absolutely. Yes. And also just empathy, being empathic, understanding, not even about the perfection, but there's actually a lot of similarities too when you really look at people, and it's not about the perfection. It's about the connectivity, and that's very Piscean as well.
Yeah.
So,
and I think like times of difficulty and tragedy like bring us together in those ways, right?
Yeah.
And what I would like to see is being able to come together in those ways without having to, without having it be a crisis.
Yes,
right?
100%. Yeah, and I'm hoping for that. Yeah. Okay, so, we're going to get into this now, but Neptune is going to make its ingress into Aries. Before we do, we wanted to just, before we talk about that, we wanted to talk about it being in Pisces, which it is right now, because when we are experiencing something that's changing or moving on, we want to look at where it was, right? We want to look at the foundation it came from, what was happening during that time before it moves. So Neptune and Pisces, we have a lot to say about it. But one thing I did notice is, Neptune moved into Pisces around, it was 2011. And what I started to see during this 13-ish to 14-year cycle, which that's how long Neptune takes to move through a sign, is there is a huge uptick in spirituality, in people becoming astrologers, in people becoming healers. I feel like even on Instagram, you look on TikTok, and everyone is an astrologer or everyone is a healer. And with the Neptunian quality, it's like you have to find there's almost an illusion and a disillusion with it, right? So using your discernment to know what calls to you and what is truth and what is not. Because the screen, which is also Neptunian, being behind the screen, it could be someone who is more so living a life on Instagram and not so much practicing that life in their human experience. So that's one of the themes that I saw. I don't know if you want to take that anywhere.
Yeah, I think, definitely the rise in magic, the rise in, magical thinking, the rise in spirituality, which, I am a product of that, right?
I am too, yeah.
Started studying magic and tarot in 2014 when I got sober. And like, I just needed something to like replace that. And, I found the tarot, and it like opened this whole world for me, right?
Yeah.
And, a lot of it becomes accessible through the internet, through social media. You have Instagram that kind of, Instagram comes out in 2010, just before Neptune moves into Pisces. And on April 9th of 2012, which is like 1 year and 5 days after Neptune's ingress, it gets bought by Facebook. And then by February of 2013 has 100 million users, right? So it just kind of like explodes, right? And, this is also the kind of interconnectivity of Pisces, right? All of a sudden, we're all like, we see each other's lives, right? And it increases empathy, but it also creates delusion, illusion, right? Confusion, conspiracy theories, right?
Yeah.
Which is also, I think, a Piscean thing, right? The like big picture, trying to make sense of everything. And it like leads back to the Illuminati or the lizard people, right? But coming back to like magic, you also have Chris Warnock and John Michael Greer published The Picatrix in 2011. Picatrix is a medieval book of astrological magic, which they publish a translation. I'm sure they were aware of the ingress of Neptune into Pisces, but this starts a renaissance with astrological magic, right? And having access to these sort of ancient techniques or medieval techniques, right? And so, I think that in one sense we have the kind of like rise of interconnectivity, the rise of spirituality, the rise of magic. And, the shadow side of that, we also have, this rise in idea of ascension or like disassociation or, something else is better than this, right? We need to like ascend or get away from this, right? Which I think is also very Piscean, right? Excuse me, the kind of disassociation, right? Or the longing for salvation or the return to the undifferentiated like prima materia, the womb of life, right? This is like, these are Neptunian themes. And, in the kind of collective spiritual world, this idea of like, oh, getting out of here, which, I have also, being a recovering drug addict and like also a magician, I have gone through that, right? And there's still parts of me that are like, oh, can't wait for the aliens to save me, or like, oh, I just want to like ascend out of here onto the astral plane. And like, it's a constant reminder, like, this is where the magic happens, right? There are all of these incorporeal beings who are like so jealous that I can do this. Like, that's big. That is power, right? And there's all these like spirits that are like, damn, I hope that tasted good. And it did, And so, like, I think that's part, like, the dark side of, or the unskillful side of Neptune and Pisces was this, like, oh, I've got to get out of here, right? Or, oh, it's the Illuminati who's doing this, right? This sort of like disempowerment, right? Thinking that it's power.
Absolutely. And then with the disassociation also comes another word would be escapism, and that is a huge Piscean thing. And it's not necessarily, I don't even like to use the terms good or bad, but, there is a benefit to escaping. There truly is. And there's also a shadow side to escapism. So that's a theme that I feel we saw quite a bit and we're still seeing that as we close this chapter out. Let's see. I mean, there's so many themes. What else? We saw, I feel like social media was the biggest one. It really, really was. And it's going to continue. It's just going to change form.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yeah, because also I think Aries is part of the social media story because, again, like Instagram, social media kicks off when Uranus moves into Aries around that time, which is like, look at me, right?
Yeah.
And I think another like Neptune and Pisces theme around social media is the social media filter, right? Filtering these images, right? And distorting reality through the screen, right? And the screen kind of replacing, right, the actual reality in the kind of simulacra, right?
Yeah, it's wild. I think about Neptune and Pisces, and back in around 2012, I was doing a lot of commercial interior design, and I was setting up like big conferences for retail. And so I was getting inspiration off of Instagram and Pinterest at the time. And I remember saying out loud, I'm like, oh, this is so crazy because everybody wants to live in this realm, in this human experience, like it is online, because it was so polished and it was beautiful. And it seemed like you would look at Pinterest and you would look at Instagram and it was these images of, like lounges or homes or whatever it may be. And, it almost felt unattainable to get to that point. Like it was too perfect. But I feel now that we're at the end of this, it's almost vice versa. So I feel like people online are trying to mock the human experience. They're trying to water it down, kind of dumb it down and keep it so it's a little more real, but it still isn't in a way. It's truly wild to look at it. And it's been a really transformative, interesting chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I like personally, I'm very grateful for the return of magic.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that this is a really key component. And I think that one of the things that is valuable about magic is that it gives us a sense of connection to the universe, to the everything, right? And through that, we can cultivate personal power, right? And it provides power for marginalized people. It provides power for people who may not have power in the kind of normal social context, right? Through, gender or skin color or economic status, right? But it gives access to power, which I think is incredibly valuable. And I think also speaks to Neptune's ingress into Aries, because that is a sign of agency. It is a sign of sovereignty. It is a sign of creating belonging, right? And so one of the things that I hope to see in this transition is being able to take the sort of interconnected spiritual understanding and the access to that, power, that wherever it comes from, into the sign of agency and sovereignty, to be able to use it, and hopefully in skillful ways that benefit the community, that benefit the all.
I love that. Yeah. And this truly has been a time of letting go of that woo-woo factor that gets so wrapped into tarot, astrology, meditation, all of the esotericism, metaphysics, like the healing arts. Before this time, I feel like it was, you wouldn't talk about it in public, really. I know I wouldn't. Just to people that, were speaking the same language. But it's true to take all of that as a collective and to use it in a way that is integral, and to be able to step into this time of Aries, the leader, the self, the individual, and use that as a way to own your power, to step into your power during this time of transition. So, yeah.
And to like claim it and be like, I'm woo woo what?
Woo woo what?
Yeah, what?
Totally. All right. That is going to be for you. You need to make sure. Yeah, that's going to be part of your new show.
Oh yeah.
So
no, I write woo woo with a Wu-Tang W.
Oh, that's amazing. All right. So let's talk a little bit about Neptune and Aries and get into this, unless there's anything else you wanted to say.
No.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about the dates. When is this happening? What is going on?
Where in my notes are the dates?
Okay. I want me to fill in.
Yes, please.
Yeah, sure. So Neptune is going to make its ingress into Aries on March 30th of this year. And this is a really interesting time because I believe it's the day before. Is it the day before? Thanks, Lizzie. You knew what I was talking about. Okay, it's the day after the solar eclipse. Yeah. And this is going to be the last one on the Aries Libra axis. And really I feel like we're already there, but it will feel very transitional at this time. So Neptune moving into Aries, what do you think we can expect from this? And, what are some things that have happened in the past that might inform the future? Because when we're looking at astrology, it is patterns. So we often look to the past to inform the future, like anything in our lives, right? So,
yeah, so, we can maybe break this down a little bit because, we're kind of loaded archetypes, right? We have Aries, which is cardinal fire, right? The sign that comes right after the spring equinox, or begins with the spring equinox, as in the northern hemisphere, we return to the light, or the light begins to overtake the darkness. It's ruled by Mars. It's also a sign of the sun's exaltation, right? So we have these kind of themes of the sun, which is the kind of identity, our kind of calling, what we aspire towards, how we aspire to shine our light into the world. And then Mars, who is maybe the right hand of the sun, the action, the willpower. It is penetrating, it is cutting, right? The sun is like, this is my heart's desire. This is who I want to be. And Mars is like, cool, I'm gonna cut a path to that, right? I'm willing to fight and struggle and get beat up to get this done, right? And Aries is kind of, in my mind, right, is sort of connected to this breaking forth through the, the returning of the light, but the glyph, which is, thought of as ram's horns, right, is also can be thought of as a little sprout breaking its way through the crust of the earth, right? The return of life and the sort of energy and fire that it takes to fight your way from a seed and break out of that seed up through all of that soil to break through the crust of the earth to receive the sun's light. And I think that's part of the Aries archetype, right? So we have this initiating, we have this questing, we have this fighting to belong, right? If we want to think of it as the first sign of the zodiac, it is the I am claiming space, right? It's arriving on the scene as this sort of like newborn energy, and everybody's like, what? Who is this? And Aries needs to like fight to claim its space. Then we have Neptune, right? This outer planet, very far away. And, you know, I love Pluto, right? And I like to think about Pluto as a planet, but I also think it's a Kuiper Belt object, which, you know, comes from the land of the dead, the beyond, right? And sort of enters into, like, just touches into the orbit of Neptune, right? But Neptune is like maybe the furthest out planet, like really far away. It is dissolving. It is, you know, a vision, a dream. It's unconscious, right? In the Greek, right, in the Odyssey, the epitaph that they use with Neptune is the earth shaker, right? So it like creates like disruptions. And one of the ways that it was thought about, or as I understand it, is that the Greeks imagined that there were these underground rivers that went beneath the earth, right? And Neptune would shake them, right? And create change and create disruption, right? And create earthquakes. We can also think about the underground rivers like flowing through our psyche, right? The unconscious rivers that Neptune, when he gets agitated or activated, shakes these, right? And creates disruption in our life, creates dreams that are either inspiring or terrifying. And sometimes they're, you know, very similar. So we have this kind of earth shaker, right? This unconscious energy, this dissolving, this mystical energy that is moving into this very initiating sign, right? Neptune is associated with the dream, with the vision, which I think also is encoded in the Aries archetype, right? If we think about fire as the fire of the imagination that inspires us with this vision, right? This is the thing that I'm questing after, right? This is the thing that I desire. And we make a mental picture of this, right? In our Neptunian imagination, right? So Neptune, this kind of vision comes in, this dream vision, this transpersonal vision, this unconscious vision comes in and inspires the fire of Aries, activates it, right? And this can go any type of way, right? You know, and this is going to be different for all of us. We're going to all go through this together, but, you know, your vision and my vision and your vision are going to be different, right? Based on whatever. Right? And so I think one of the main themes that I see, or one of the themes that I see, is that there is going to be the vision that is created that creates the sort of mythos or telos, the thing that drives us, the thing that inspires us, the thing that whets the appetite, the thing that initiates the quest, right? And in Don Quixote, which one of my favorite books, and also I think is very aligned with the energy of Neptune and Aries, even though it wasn't written during that time. But there's this line that it is the quest for the impossible dream, right? We are questing after the impossible dream, and I think that is really the part of the Neptune and Aries vibe.
And I love what you said. It's different words you said, but to kind of put it all together, it's the eruption of the river inside of us in order to initiate and inspire. And what a beautiful thing that is to step into. And you're right, it will be different for everyone. As a collective, I think it is already playing out in ways, and we are seeing it politically. We are seeing it spiritually, and we're seeing differences here. So do you want to talk a little bit about that? And
yeah, and I think, you know, part of the story is we've had the nodes move retrograde through the zodiac, right? So we've had the North Node moving retrograde through Aries, and Neptune and the North Node are going to switch places, right? Just as, you know, around the time Neptune is coming to the end of Pisces, right? So we have had this sort of Aries point being activated. We have had this ground being fertilized by Rahu, the dragon's head, who is consuming and consuming and consuming and pulling us deeper into incarnation. And then we have Neptune, this sort of mystical consciousness passing over that ground also. So, you know, I think that there is this relationship in that this like Aries point has been really kind of activated, right? Which again is this like initiating and questing energy. And the first decan of Aries, which is what the North Node just moved out of today, and Neptune will move into March 30th, right after the last Aries eclipse, is, you know, has been pictured as a dark man with like red eyes carrying an axe, right? So this is the initiating energy of the zodiac, right? And Austin Coppock kind of talks about it as in the much sought after 36 Faces, the impossible. I have one too. I have an online copy.
Nice.
But yeah, the way that Austin sort of talks about it is, right, the axe is severing and separating us from the mother, right? It is the cutting the umbilical cord, cutting us away from the kind of undifferentiated Piscean soup, right? As we come into individuality and come into our own agency. And also the axe is what we use to sort of cut our way into the world, to clear land, to cut down trees to make a house, right? To cut down trees to make a boat, right? And so it is this like separating from the undifferentiated and making our way in the world. And he talks about this sort of ecstatic energy coming into this area that is, the spirit of it is this like primal force that is both separating and trying to forge its way in the world, but does not really have that like formed kind of developmental self yet, right? And is still kind of questing for that individuation, that like coming into the self, into the fully formed self, right? But it is this kind of like tyrannical baby, to use a line from Austin Coppock, right, to begin with.
I mean, that's a great description. And just for context, just for anyone who is new to astrology, just so you know, Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. So this is a new cycle, a new 165-year cycle, truly. And a lot of what you said is really wrapped into that. I want to talk a little bit about politics. We're not going to get totally into it, but one thing I did notice when Neptune was in Pisces is we experienced a lot of spiritual leaders rising up. And so there are many leaders as we move into Neptune and Aries. And with our political climate, you know, we are deciding as a collective, what does leadership mean? What does it mean to be in charge of a country? We know who is in charge of the country now, but what type of person do we want in charge? And I was just thinking about this Bible verse, and it's from the King James version of the Bible, and it is, you can't serve two masters. And so I found that really interesting as we move into this time, because Aries is one, it's singular. And, when we're talking about Gemini, Libra too, it's two, but Aries is one. So that quote, you can't serve two masters, I feel is so potent. And so one thing for us to think about as a collective is when we're thinking about masters or leaders, let's decide, are we going to serve love or are we going to serve fear? I think that's something really important to think about when we are in this time of Neptune and Aries, and deciding what leadership looks like, because it may take different form.
Yeah. And I think with Aries, right, again, the exaltation of the sun, this idea of sovereignty, right? Yeah. And I think one of the things that shows up with Neptune is, one, it dissolves boundaries, right? It dissolves the boundary between the conscious and the unconscious, allowing sort of dreams and visions to filter in, right? It also dissolves the individual into the collective, right? It is a wave that sweeps us, right? And so we are going to be swept by an Aries wave, right? Which is this, we can think of like that individual with the axe, right? Or, the kind of strong individual, right? And I think there's, cult of personality that comes up. There is a very kind of pioneering or like frontiers or like rugged individualist quality of Aries. And I think the rugged individualist is like a very, very toxic myth that is encoded into American culture, right? The like pull yourself up by the bootstraps, like if you want it, you got to fight for it. Like I think that this is incredibly toxic, and I imagine that there is going to be a revival of this myth. I think also Neptune reveals what we idealize in whatever sign it's in, right? So the idealization of the individual, right? The heroic individual, which again, I think can be like incredibly toxic, especially if we surrender ourselves, right? And put our hope in some external force that is going to save us, because, the Redeemer and Savior is also a very Neptunian quality, right? And Liz Green talks about this a lot in her masterpiece on Neptune. Right. And so, one of the ways that this can go is like, oh, I want this strong leader to save me, right? And dissolving our own sovereignty, dissolving our own agency, getting swept away in the sort of individualism that promises us salvation if we just give over our power to this like strongman leader. Right. That's not where I want to be at. Right. But I think that is going to be a tide that we are navigating or surfing, depending on, how, like what kind of boats we bring to the party.
100%. Yeah. And that's illusion and idealism, you know, and the illusion and the idealism is very wrapped into Neptune. So, what is the illusion you have of leadership, and is that real? I mean, it's something to think about. We, Jonah and I both are tarot readers, and who's familiar with the tarot out here? Okay, yes. So the Emperor card, the Emperor is represented by Aries, and if you look at him, he's sitting on his throne, he's cloaked, he is of course portrayed as courageous, but he is also protecting. He's protecting his kingdom, and he's kind of large and in charge. He's stoic. He's not moving. But whenever I look at the Emperor card, I mean, there are, we can say shadow sides to the Emperor, and there's also some really beautiful sides to the Emperor. But when I look at the Emperor, I always want to say, what's under that cloak? Like, let's see what's really there. And the Emperor card is really representing leadership as we move into Neptune in Aries.
And, I think one of the themes of the sign of Aries, and this is coming from the star myth, right? Is the story of Jason and the Argonauts and the Golden Fleece, right? The quest for the Golden Fleece, which bestows the right to rule, right? Is placed in this grove sacred to Aries, right? Mars in Colchis, and is bestows on blanking on his name, but the king of Colchis the right for rulership, right? And it's Jason's quest to go retrieve this golden fleece, which will give him his ability to reclaim the throne that has been usurped by his evil uncle, right? And Jason, is left or taken away and given to Chiron at the moment of his birth because his evil uncle is, seeking to kill all of the heirs, right? And so Jason is this 20-year-old kid who shows up with one shoe, right? Fulfilling the prophecy, who is like, that is the kind of archetypal Aries of like not belonging, right? And showing up on the scene and everybody's like, who are you, right? And then having to go on this like pretty intense quest to like prove, oh, I have a right to be here, right? And this is, you know, an initiating myth of the zodiac and also of the archetype of Aries, right? Like, what do I have to do to prove that I'm okay, right? That I belong here, that I deserve to be here. And, you know, I think the story of the Golden Fleece is like pretty fascinating because it begins with Phrixus and Hele, who are these two kids. They're the children of a cloud nymph, Nephele, who their evil stepmother, Ino, has created a famine. She has poisoned the earth, right? Because she is jealous of them and wants them out of the picture and poisons the earth and then blames them and creates a false prophecy that's like, oh, if you just sacrifice these children, then everything's going to be okay and everything will come back to life. And, you know, we can think about in our current culture the ways that it's like, oh, those people are poisoning the soil, right? Those people are harming your economic growth or like making your groceries more expensive. And so if we just sacrifice them, everything will be fine.
That's a brilliant way to explain it all. And yeah, that's a really good example. We had so many examples, and mythology was one that you really wanted to touch upon. And this is just a tiny one, but who's seen Dune? I know, Adina, you're a huge fan. Okay, so last night we were watching Dune, David Lynch, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is divine timing. I'm supposed to watch Dune right now because I feel like this is Neptune and Aries with like the melange, the spice, right? They're trying to get to the spice, which can help them to transcend time and space, which in this season of, you know, our society, we are seeing people who are, I mean, it's going to happen. And that's a thing, but there's a lot of power wrapped into that. And it's kind of like which emperor is going to get to that first. And even the way they were speaking with each other, and they were, you know, it wasn't, of course, it was like a language, but the way they were communicating, it was definitely otherworldly, and it was a different way of communicating. So it was really wild to see, to watch Dune last night and just think about what we were going to talk about today. And so immediately I started to look at like David Lynch's chart and just, you know, see what was going on. And then I decided to look at the release date of that movie, and it was not relevant to what we're talking about. The only thing is Neptune was conjoined Uranus. And I feel like when Neptune conjoins outer planets or even slow-moving planets, we do see breakthroughs. We see big things. Another thing that happened during the Neptune-Uranus conjunction is we all got to experience the World Wide Web in 1993. So that is when the internet, the World Wide Web, was launched to us. We were able to use it. And Uranus and Neptune, of course, that's a whole different story. But think about this in terms of longevity, right? So where are we from that point? It's truly wild, progressive. It is something we probably would never have dreamed of with Neptune, you know, being able to FaceTime with people, to post on social media, to have an audience of some people like hundreds and thousands of people. It's truly, truly fascinating, wild, scary, all the things. So, that's one example too.
Yeah. And, you know, just to come back to Dune for a minute, you know, I think Paul Moadib, right, is the sort of like savior redeemer, right?
Yeah.
Who also turns into an asshole, right? And this like, you know, messiah that like becomes incredibly toxic. And I think this is a thing that we can like, we will or may see with Neptune and Aries, right? That sort of emperor energy that gets fused with the messiah or the guru, you know? And I think one of the things that I keep thinking about is just the like outsourcing of our sovereignty or our agency to an external force, right? And how we can really like think about holding or claiming or purifying our own sovereignty or our own kind of divine light, right? That our own telos, right? The thing that pulls us through the surface of the earth, right? That pulls us into the light, and not sort of dissolving that and handing that power over to somebody who's going to rescue or save us. Because I think that's where we're going to get in trouble individually and collectively.
Yeah. And, just imprinting what you just said and really digesting that, the Bible verse I read earlier, it's, you can't serve two masters. Well, we know we are our own master.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, hey, during this time, let's choose ourselves instead of outsourcing, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shall we talk about Saturn a bit, or is there anything else you want to talk about with just Neptune?
Oh, I have like 50 pages of notes.
4 hours.
Yeah, we're on a 3-hour tour now.
Yes, absolutely.
No, let's talk about Saturn. I love me some Saturn.
Yeah. Okay. I actually do love Saturn. So I really resonate with that.
And, like just to sort of ease into it, right? We have kind of Saturn time, which is we have 90 minutes for this conversation. And then we have Neptunian time, right? Which is dream time, right? Which is that 3-hour tour, right? That then goes on for like multiple seasons.
Yeah.
Where we're inventing coconut radios and whatnot.
Totally.
Right. And I think that as Neptune and Saturn come together, we have to grapple with the dream time, right? And terrestrial time. And, dream time is also like fairy tale time, right? Going through a wardrobe and ending up in another world, spending weeks and months there, and then coming back and it's only been an hour, right? And so, like, I think time is going to have a very interesting relationship this year and next year, because we get like Neptune and Saturn come within 13 minutes of each other, right? That's like right there, but they don't actually touch, and then it takes until I believe February of 26 for them to actually come together. So we get this like, oh, maybe this thing is gonna happen. Oh no, and sort of like dissolves through our fingers, like sand through our fingers, as Neptune does. And then we have to wait, right?
So what would the thing be, in your opinion?
I don't know.
Okay.
It could be anything. But, last time we had Neptune in Aries, which is last time we had Saturn-Neptune conjunction was in 1989 in Capricorn. And we had the fall of the Berlin Wall, right? And so, I mean, that is a great image for Neptune and Saturn, right? Saturn is the structured reality, right? And Neptune is the waters that wash it away, right? And dissolve it. And like that did not happen all at once, right? That, water, the collective water, right, had been washing that away since its inception post World War II. Right.
And Saturn is boundaries, and Neptune dissolves, so the dissolving of the boundary.
Yeah.
And we saw that, and there's very literal ways that these transits can play out too, and that's one of them.
Yeah, and also, funny story, 1989 we have the invention of Game Boy, Nintendo's Game Boy. Right. And so this is like, now we're all, glued to our screens. Right. But that was the beginning of it. Right. And that's what I came up into. I got a Game Boy and I was like, goodbye. Right. That was like the architecture of my disassociation. Right. Also, the first episode of Seinfeld airs. Right. Right. A show about nothing. Right, which is Saturn, Neptune, right? The container that holds the dream in some ways, that holds the like everything or the nothing. I have another myth.
Yeah, please.
So one of the ways that I've been thinking about Neptune is in relationship to Dionysus, right? God of wine and ecstasy and intoxication and also madness. And in one of the in the Bacchae, right, which is a Euripides play, it's the story of Dionysus coming to Thebes and enchanting all of the women who go off into the hills and become maenads and followers of Dionysus and are, engage in like dancing and revelry and ecstasy. And Pentheus, who is the king, who is a very Saturnian figure, is like, oh, hell no. We are maintaining order. And maintaining order, brother. And Dionysus shows up, and Pentheus does not believe that he's a god, right? And has him thrown in jail. Dionysus is like, whatever, has the chains fall away, right? Gets out. And basically, Pentheus is ripped to shreds by his mom and his sisters, right? For it is the like physical world, right, that does not believe in the unseen world, in the magical realm, in the Dionysian, in the transpersonal, right? And it wants to hold on to its materialist reality so hard that it becomes torn asunder, right? And we can think about this. It's a little like gruesome and graphic, but if we think about this in a kind of archetypal or psychological sense, right, as we like hold on to our Saturnian reality in the face of, the undercurrents of the unconscious, right, or the unseen world, it will literally tear us apart as we like cannot grapple with this thing is outside of my structured vision of my Saturnian logic. Right. And so one of the things that comes up with the Saturn conjunction with Neptune is the sort of, transpersonal and the trance states and the, mystical vision that if we try and deny it, it will overwhelm us. Right. And Neptune, again, is dissolving. And like you were saying, dissolving structures, right? And in some ways, dissolving the structure of reality. Mm-hmm. And with any of the outer planets, anything that we really hold on to is going to hurt like hell as it gets ripped away, right? As it turns to, sand in our fingers, right? And anything that we're like, no, this is like really important, right? Neptune washes it away. Like, what are we going to do, right? You just got to surrender. You got to like give into it. And also like sacrifice, right? Which means to make sacred, right? And is a big piece of Neptune, right? What are we making sacred here? What are we willing to surrender to make sacred, to honor, and to give as a libation to these gods, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so with the mythology and with everyone in their everyday lives, in this society, if you could just name a couple things, just kind of watered down, how can people use that version to interpret into their lives, and like maybe use it to not necessarily forecast, but, get ready for.
Yeah. So just taking a moment to like digest that and sit with that, I mean, like we're going through a time of great change, right? We have Neptune changing signs, we had Pluto changing signs, we have Uranus changing signs, we have Saturn changing signs, right? That's a lot of changing signs, right? That is a lot of shifting, right?
And these are slow moving planets, just for context. So again, it doesn't happen like Venus and Mars. These are very slow. They are outer planets. So this is a big deal.
Yeah. And, I heard an astrologer say that like when we have outer planet transits, right? If we think about, our relationship to the planets as lessons to learn, right? Mercury, Venus, the sun, the moon, right? These are like daily lessons, right? Little like, oh, I read a factoid, right? When we have like Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, Pluto, it's like that's a graduate school education. That is a PhD right there, right? You are learning this lesson, right? With Pluto, it's 20 years, right? We're going to have 20 years of Pluto in Aquarius. That is quite the education that we are getting, right?
Yeah.
And so, how do we show up for this? How do we show up for the lessons that Neptune has to teach us, right? And that Saturn has to teach us as well, right? And these are very different lessons because Saturn is like discipline and dedication, right? Saturn is making something real. Neptune is dissolving, right? Dissolving boundaries, dissolving structures, right? Dissolving those lessons. And so, one of the things that I've really been sitting with and thinking about as I've been obsessively researching Neptune and Aries is, this idea of purification, right? This idea of dissolving and dissolution. And, one of my interests is alchemy, right? Which is, connected to astrology. It's connected to therapy, and I think it's connected to life. When you cook food, that is alchemy, right? Dyeing clothing is alchemy, right? Embalming the dead, that's alchemy, right? Like we have alchemy suffused with our lives, right? And one of the alchemical processes is dissolution or solutio, right? Which is the dissolving of a substance in something larger, right? And I think this is one of the things that we're going to experience with Neptune and Aries. And one of the things that we can think about, right, is this initiating myth, this sort of like fire that inspires us, this vision, right? And then Neptune comes along and we dissolve that, right, and purify this, right? We purify this vision. We let go in some ways to be like how can I surrender this so it can be its purest form, so I can shine my light more brightly into the world. There's an alchemical sort of trope or drawing of a king drowning in this body of water, right? And the king is our sort of like ego identity. It is our sense of self. This is who I am supposed to be, right? Who society wants me to be, or my parents wanted me to be, or my partner thinks I should be, or whatever, that kind of external motivation, right? And being able to dissolve that ego identity, dissolve that false notion of the self, so that we can purify it and create, a deeper relationship with our inner solar light, right? With that martial will, with that initiating vision or myth of this is who I am supposed to be. This is who I am called to be. This is the divine name that is written in my soul, in my heart, right? And calling ourselves back to that, right? So, that may be a little abstract, and to put it into more concrete terms, right? Being able to sort of purify our vision of who we are and who we want to be, right? And purify our motivation and our desire, right? And again, this is going to look different for all of us, right? To how do we connect in with that sort of, burning sense of self, right? And, that may take layers and layers to wash away, right? But we got 14 years, right? So this will develop over time, right? And to really think about, what are the ways that I can purify, or what needs to be dissolved here? What can be dissolved here, so that the kind of thing that separates me, right, that obscures my light, can dissipate a little bit, right? And coming back to one of Chrissy Mollis's parents, right, this sort of divine interplay of the spirit in this world, right, and remembering that we are all the spirit, just experiencing itself, right? We are all sort of this interconnected body of the divine having these human experiences, right? And it's just an illusion that we're separate. It's an important illusion, right? And this is Saturn, that we are here to have this individual unique experience, right? And someday we will return back to that cosmic Piscean soup, right? But like right now we are here, you are having your experience, you are having yours, I'm having mine. And this is really important because this is how our soul grows. And also to remember that this is all just like the divine experiencing itself through me, right? And how can I show up for that, right? How can I dissolve that separation a little bit? I was told, a long time ago, this person was talking about the Kabbalah, which is not a tradition that I have studied much, but they were talking about the sort of like light of Ein Sof, which is the sort of everything, right? The origin, the source, right? That comes and emanates down through all of these levels. And this is what happens in astrology also, right? We have the Godhead that emanates down through all the spheres, right? The 8 spheres, and comes down to us, the most dense, right? And the sort of, the light that exists within everything, right, becomes a little looser, a little lighter when it is acknowledged, when it is appreciated, when it is honored. So what this person was saying is, like, when you take a broom and beat your child with it, right, it makes that broom a little more dense, right? It forgets its origin, right? But when you take that broom and like sweep up before a wedding, right, or tidy the house, right, and honor your space, it makes that light a little looser, right, and the light can shine through a little bit more. And this is something to like really think about as we connect in with this divine vision of Neptunian consciousness, right? Is how do we make that light a little looser, right? How do we honor the light in ourselves, in each other, in the animate world, right? And bring that vision, you know, a little kind of like turn up the volume on that vision a little bit, right? So we don't forget our way, but we remember the kind of quest that we were set on.
That's brilliant and beautiful.
Sorry.
Yeah. So no, that's very helpful. And, you know, I hope all of you can take that with you during this time and be able to use that in your own personal way. With Saturn present, I do want to say that Saturn strips down. Saturn will take away. Saturn brings things to the core. And when I'm thinking of Saturn, another way to look at this is maybe it's the person, maybe it's the identity you've always had without the distraction, without the illusion. So if that comes up for you too, just be mindful of it, because we all come into this world, in my opinion, with a purity and an innocence. And what happens is the distractions around us, trauma, you know, other people's energy, what is in the world, it informs who we are, of course, and that's how we grow. So don't be afraid to strip down to back to who you were, if that's something that comes up, or step into a new identity, which that could very well happen during this time.
And I think, right, Saturn is the container, right? And we need that container, right? We need our physical forms. We need our ego identity, right? We need something to hold the mystical vision of Neptune, because without that, right, we forget, right? We get sort of swept away. And coming back to like Dionysus, right, we can get lost in madness, right? If we forget the kind of our connection, right, and the container that holds the ecstasy and the joy, we can be driven mad, right? And, you know, cars are real, right? And that's a really important thing to remember. And you can't fly, right? You may fly in your imagination, but, you know, the being swept away in the Dionysian frenzy and like jumping off the roof is not a good idea. And that's what Saturn's for, to be like, hey, where are your car keys? Remember where you parked, right? Even in the midst of the ecstatic.
Yeah, that's so important. And I love what Rick Levine once said. Rick Levine is a master astrologer. If you're not familiar with his work, he's brilliant. He once said, Neptune creates the metaphysical scaffolding upon which Saturn can crystallize form. And I think that's really beautiful, because a lot of times you think Saturn comes first, right? You need the foundation and then the dream can come, but it's almost the opposite. And I think that's a really brilliant way to look at it.
Yeah, and Carolyn Casey, who's one of my favorite astrologers, has this line, imagination lays the tracks for the reality train, right? Which is like, same thing, right? We have to like be able to envision it, right? So that we can get there, right? And also, you know, one of the things that she says in Making the Gods Work for You, which is a fantastic astrology book, she's like, if you can dream it up, you can dream it down, right? And I think that's so important, especially because like the reality that we have collectively dreamed, right, has some issues, right? And is like coming apart at the seams in some ways, and has some structural failings. And so like we can also dream that down and dream a better reality, right? And this is all of our work together, right? And I think that we have been fed this vision of apocalypse for so long, right? And it's a very uncreative vision, right? And the idea that, what that creates is like, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than it is the end of capitalism, right? Capitalism has only been around for like 150, 200 years, and like already it's pushed us to the brink, right? And so it's so much easier to be like, the only way to fix this is to like burn it all down, which I don't think is true. And I think that's really unimaginative, right? Neptune, as our imagination, we can imagine something much better, And that also begins in each of us, right? And the seed in our heart that we are planting, right? And the things that inspire us and the ways that we take agency to say, this is the vision that I am dreaming into reality. This is the old vision that we are dreaming down, and this is what we are dreaming up now.
I think vision is such a good word for this time, and dreams, of course.
Yeah.
And man, when I was 8 years old, I had a journal and I used to write in like Crayola markers in it, and it was all different colors. And I'm just remembering this quote I wrote down, and it was, vision is the world's most desperate need. There are no hopeless situations, but only people who think hopelessly. And that just popped in, downloaded Neptune into my head. And I think that's really important to take with us during this time, because the mind is so powerful and the heart is too. And what we think about every day, what we dream about every day, keep it in line, keep it aligned with what you really want. And
Yeah. And I think that, is part of the purification, right?
yeah.
And the like dissolving away this sort of like apocalyptic vision, or the belief that like I can't do it, or I don't belong, or I'm not enough, or it's not enough, or it's not possible, right? And these are all like limiting beliefs that I think are fed to us by oppressive systems, right?
Yeah. So as a collective, we kind of talked about a few things that people can do during this time to work together, but is there anything specific you want to give to the audience, talk about with? We talked about the individual quite a bit.
Yeah. So, for the collective, like, again, I think that we are going to see this sort of, maybe like looking at history is kind of an interesting way to approach this. And I think it's important to mention that the last time Neptune was in Aries, we had the American Civil War, right? And so what we had was like two competing initiating visions, right? One of like separation and one of like trying to maintain the whole, right? We also have competing visions on what the like right way to live is, right? People believing that it was their God-given right to own other human beings, which I think is a fucked up vision, pardon my language, And out of that comes the sort of myth of the South being wronged in this, right? There's like a mythology that is invented out of this. So I think that we see these like mythologies, misguided mythologies that are created, or misguided stories, or just stories that are created in general, right? That help to simplify and make digestible very complex topics, right? And we have, visions that like create division and separation. Another thing that happens during Neptune and Aries, I believe this was 1534, we have Henry VIII, who separates from the Catholic Church so that he can get a divorce, right? And creates the Protestant Reformation in England, which like also, along with that, Cromwell creates laws that anyone who criticizes the king that's treasonous, right? So anyone who's like, maybe he shouldn't get a divorce, like you could be thrown in jail for treason, right? And so that like, is kind of scary, right, to think about. And again, this is this sort of like separating, right? This cutting, and Mars, the ruler of Aries, is severing, right? Is cutting away, is creating difference, right? Is individuating. But like, if this happens in a toxic way, right? This sort of separation that can create conflict and strife, which straight up goes on until the 2000s, right? The division and troubles between Catholics and Protestants in Northern Ireland and Ireland, right? Like this comes out of Henry VIII wanting a divorce, right? Which is like a funny thing, but like then we see the ripple effect, right? And the sort of belief, the overwhelming belief that inspires violence, right? And so this is the kind of shadow side of all of this. On the upside, we get the Theosophical Society begins in the 1870s, right? And so this sort of like initiation of mysticism and spirituality. We have a rise at post-Civil War. The Ku Klux Klan is started, right? But also there's a rise of secret societies, right? So the Oddfellows, the Masons, all of these sort of mystical orders, right, are sort of on the rise in America. So, there is this like spiritual questing for good or for not so good, right? Or skillfully or unskillfully. And so these are also things that we may see in the collective. Also, we have Lister develops antiseptic bandages, right? And so we have Neptune is connected with like disease and germs, right? And so we have like innovation around antiseptic health, right? And cleanliness and germ theory, right? We have Darwin who pioneers evolution, which also becomes a belief system, right? We have kind of materialism that comes out of that, right? So again, like we have a lot of like competing reality tunnels that develop through Neptune and Aries, right? Which in the 1860s, 1870s was like, okay, we got like 3 different reality tunnels. Now each of us are in our own reality tunnel, right? And we believe that to be so true, right? Like what I see on my Instagram must be the truth for everybody, right? And so we're going to see that, right? The kind of initiating mythos and telos that like is fed to you through an algorithm in the black mirror, right? The disassociative black mirror that we are all holding, right? That this is the truth and this is what I must quest after, So be aware of that, right?
And with Saturn, Saturn brings discernment. So make sure you use your discernment during this time. Yeah. So with Neptune, Aries, Saturn, key words would be illusion, disillusion, dissolving, vision, dreams, identity. I would say stripping away, also mastery with Saturn. The container, the foundation. Do you have any other keywords you want to throw out there?
Yeah, I think limitation, right?
Yeah.
Also, Saturn is in its fall in Aries, right? And a planet in their fall has their gifts used against them, right? So they are laid low, they are depressed. Saturn is kind of a depressed dude to begin with, right? And in Aries, it can be like, like biting off more than you can chew. Right. Saturn is like, I got to make this real. Aries is like, here's this great vision. Right. Saturn's like, okay, I've got to make this real. But Aries is like, here's this other great vision. Saturn's like, oh, now I have to make that real too. Oh, this is a lot. Right. And so Aries is like starting the fires. Right. And then Saturn is needing to tend them. And that can feel really overwhelming to Saturn. And it can bring up feelings of I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. Right. I think enoughness is going to be a really big one. Feelings of belonging, because again, I think Aries is that quest for the golden fleece to be like, I can belong, right? I do belong, which like, spoiler alert, like you're good just the way you are. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to change anything. You don't need to fix anything, right? You're good, right? And as I say that, my Saturn parts are like, oh, no, you are not. You didn't even get through like a 10th of your notes, right?
Well, with that said, yeah, same, but it's okay. We got through quite a bit, and I think we gave the listeners, our audience, a lot to work with during this time. And we could dive deeper and do another recording another time. But for now, does anyone have any questions on anything we talked about on the ingress into Aries, Neptune's ingress into Aries, anything they want to bring up from the conversation? BB, just 1 second. Let's get you a mic. Yeah.
Ding.
Yeah, I didn't know we're hosting a sound bath tonight. Good job, Michael.
Thank you. First of all, does that make a difference?
Yeah.
Okay, good. If any of you have heard me sniffling, I'm not sick at all. There's got to be some kind of astrological significance around severe allergies in Tucson. It's just insane. Anyway, good. I'm glad I was worried I wasn't going to be able to speak because of it, because I'm so crazy congested. It's funny to me. Anyway, Dune. I wanted you to talk about Frank Herbert. When Dune first came out, what was happening with... I even forget. Was it Neptune?
Neptune.
That we were talking about with the significance of, because when the book was released in the 70s, I became obsessed, and there's a little part of me that will always be obsessed with Paul. I have to, it's a guilty secret. And I love that you said this, you made the comment of the hero who becomes the anti-hero, and the flip side is always the shadow. Mm-hmm. Darlings, I'm old enough to know that that's the damn case with everything we encounter here. The flip side is always going to be the shadow. Look for that shadow. Don't run away from it. It's very important to embrace that. Okay, so that's one thing I want to say.
Yeah.
The other is a keyword for Neptune, and how that keyword for me. Yes, there's vision, there's a dream, there's dissolution, there's all of this, but imagination. As the actress that I have been in my life, I understood Saturn and Neptune playing together in terms of Saturn, and I love that quote from
Rick.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I hadn't heard that from him before. It's brilliant, and it reminded me of this. Free improvisation, the brilliance of it can only exist with Saturn's structure, Saturn's protection, the arms of loving Saturn. So as an artist who plays with imagination, you cannot run free with it until you have that structure, and it requires a tremendous amount of Saturnian discipline to get into the mastery of not being able to fly into insanity when you run in playing with your imagination, which is what an actor does. So I just wanted to bring that up.
That's beautiful, and that is such a great example. And BB, yes, I feel like, I've seen your chart, and I do see that also, that you have so much creativity and you have honed that in. So thank you for bringing that up. Yeah.
Yeah. And, as you're talking about Paul, right, I also think about Saturn and the Kronos myth, right? Kronos is the first revolutionary, right, who liberates the Titans from Ouranos and his oppression, right? And then Saturn immediately imprisons everybody except for his people and becomes a tyrant, right?
Yeah. So sad.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, that is the cycle, right? The liberator becomes the oppressor,
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, BB.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we can pass it over.
Just as we talk about the cycles, and looking back to the last time that Saturn was with Neptune, I wonder, thinking about where we are in the cosmos, is that a factor at all? Like we've been here before and we've tried it, and maybe it didn't go so well, with the wars and things like that. Mm-hmm. But is there any other force that's impacting? Maybe now the powers are aligned a little bit more so that it could be more optimistic.
Yeah, and also different because there were different transits going on at that time. So this is when we look at a chart and when we synthesize a chart, we're talking about one isolated transit ingress. So Neptune moving into Aries, but there's a lot going on. Also, I mean, like we're saying, Pluto has moved into Aquarius. We're going to experience Uranus moving into Cancer, or Gemini. Why am I saying Cancer? Sorry, I'm skipping ahead. And
wishful thinking.
yeah, definitely. Kind of. I actually, we won't talk about that. But yes, there's different energies that are happening right now that were not happening then. So it is different. And it's not all doom and gloom. You know, we definitely feel like there are things to be aware of because there are patterns, you know, and we were talking about the Civil War, and yes, that is very true. But there are also other things that came up during that time that are beautiful and wonderful. So,
and we're getting a sextile from Uranus and Pluto to that Neptune and Saturn in Aries, right? And the sextile is a supportive aspect. It is associated with Venus, right? So it's kind of there's like some socializing going on, maybe even conspiring, right? But there is, you know, a supportive relationship, a communicative relationship between all of the outer planets, you know, which in 89 it was conjunctions, right? And then you know, at other times, there was, you know, in the 60s, there was the Pluto-Saturn conjunction, which, Pluto-Uranus conjunction, which characterizes a lot of the kind of late 60s and that generation. And, you know, there's similarities between what's happening now. Last time, two Saturn cycles ago, Saturn was in Aries in the late 60s, right? In 67 through 69, right? But instead of having a Uranus Pluto conjunction, we're having a trine between Uranus and Pluto and a sextile with Neptune, right? So there's like harmonious and supportive relationships that are happening between, you know, these energies of liberation and revolution and the energy of imagination and visioning, right? And mysticism, you know? And so we can use this to our benefit, you know, and one of the things with supportive aspects, it allows us to integrate some of the challenge and difficulty that we experience from the, you know, Pluto-Saturn conjunction, right? Or that we might experience from the Saturn-Neptune conjunction or from the harder aspects. So, you know, there is some collaboration that is happening between the planets of transformation, liberation, the unconscious, the dream realm, right? And it's kind of up to us, like how do we acknowledge that, and how do we come into conscious awareness of that, or how do we just create the conditions so that can benefit us, so that in turn we can benefit our community and our society and our world, right?
Also, you know, with astrology, yes, sometimes history repeats itself in certain patterns. It's not like an exact replay. But when we're looking at transits and we're forecasting and seeing what's coming up, it's really important to take into mind, hey, if this happened then, what can we do to inform the future now? You know, we don't have to sit back and watch it happen. That's not really how astrology works. Astrology it has dimensions, it's happening. So how do we take aligned action with what is happening? Yeah. Thank you for that question. Did that answer? Okay, great. Anyone else? Marcella.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Hi.
Hi.
I had kind of a degree question about when Neptune and Saturn are connecting in Aries. I know you said they come within like 13 minutes of each other, and then they don't come together again for like another year. Did you say?
Yeah.
Thank you. February 2026. What degree do they meet up in, and is it the same each time?
Yeah. So I think it's at I can check
One
the
or
chart. It's 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can get exact. Hold on.
Yeah.
I don't want to give the wrong
Sorry,
answer.
I'm just nerding out about
No,
the degrees because
degrees are important.
important, right? Because they can denote different things to pay attention to.
Yeah, and I think the first 10 degrees or the decans, encompass 10 degrees, right?
Right.
So, in a kind of like a little zoomed out, right? That first 10 degrees is ruled by that, dark man with red eyes and an axe, right? So that energy is kind of alive in those first 10 degrees, that kind of initiating, forging, separating energy.
Okay.
And I think the very beginnings and the very endings of signs are always like pretty fraught.
I know. I have a lot of really strong beginning and ending placements. That's why I ask where these are hitting.
Yeah. So I think we were talking about this too, critical degrees and
yes.
the anaretic degree. It's actually 0 degrees, which I should have looked at that
Super
because
exciting.
we were talking about that last night, the 0 degree point of Aries. And
Wonderful.
that's, the nodes just changed signs, but we just experienced, the nodes at 0 degrees.
Yeah.
So, don't panic. It's not like,
I think of it like the spark of, like, it's the first breath of life.
It
That
is.
0. It's,
Yeah.
yeah.
it's that first breath you take. So that's kind of exciting and more of a relief
Yeah.
than I thought. So
And
is it both for both when it meets up again? Is it the same?
I checked the chart for February 2026 and it's that 0 degree point.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is an inception point.
Thank you.
And what was I going to say? That 0 degree Aries point, that is the spring equinox, right? So that is this moment where in the northern hemisphere the sun comes back to supremacy, right? It is the shifting between night and day, right? And so there is something that becomes enlightened, right? There is more light, right? Just by a moment, right? So I think that is really important with any of the cardinal signs, right? Like how the light that we experience shifts, right? And I think that there's something really powerful encoded in that. And, I don't think that light always good, dark always bad, right? Because there is the sort of mystical, kind of intuitive night consciousness, right? That then gets overtaken by the logical, right, or clarity that we get in day consciousness, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else have any questions, comments? All right. Well, then we're going to go ahead and close out. But before we do, Jonah, what are you reading right now? I'm always interested. I love books and I read a ton. I collect books. I collect vintage astrology books.
Ooh,
so
nice.
yeah, but what's going on with you? What are you reading?
You mean, what did I bring with me on this road trip?
Yeah.
Let's see here. I'm reading a book about fire and water by Darby Costello, which is excellent, and I love her work. I am reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein or The New Prometheus.
Cool.
And I don't really read fiction, and it's been a challenge, but what else do I have? Ecstasy by Robert A. Johnson, who's a Jungian, and that's a book about Dionysus.
Nice.
Picatrix, I have with me. I have Dorotheus of Sion, a bunch of other things. Those are just the ones that come to mind immediately. Yeah. I have A Year to Live by, I think, Stephen Levine.
Oh, I just pulled that out the other
Yeah,
day.
I mean, 'tis the
around the new year.
season.
Yeah, I was
Yep.
like, should I start this? And then I
Yeah.
asked Rick, I'm like, are you related? He's like, no, everyone asks.
He is related to Noah Levine, who started the Dharma Punks.
Yeah, that's what he said. Yeah,
it's,
that's really
Noah's
interesting.
father. Yeah.
Yeah,
Man, yeah, I brought like 15 books with me.
nice.
And now I'm blanking on what else. But, I'll either read them or I won't.
Those are all good ones. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you for
Hey,
being on the show. And
you.
this was such a lovely conversation. So thank you so much. And where can people find you if they want to learn more about you, or if they want to book a reading with you or follow your work?
Yeah, you can find me in the Neptunian seas of interconnected consciousness, and also on Instagram at Blind Stallion Space Wizard, underscores between the words. And for those with blank stares, Blind Stallion Space Wizard.
And I'll put that in the show notes also.
Thank you.
So yeah.
And then I have a radio show called The Melee Report. That is my astrology-themed radio show. You can find that on SoundCloud. I think it's under The Melee Report. My YouTube channel is Camp Wizard Camp, and my website is campwizardcamp.com. And and maybe put those in the show notes too, because it's
Of course.
I like. Let me just say this. Like, I got dressed today and I was like, this is what normal people wear, right? And then like look at myself in the mirror and I'm like, whoa, who's that weird person? And this is like with the like names that I create for myself and the pseudonyms. I'm like, yeah, this is normal stuff, like Camp Wizard Camp. That makes sense. And then I hear it come out of my mouth and I see people's responses and I'm like, oh, maybe I don't know about that.
No.
But it's been working, right? And you know what? Like, you got to keep it fun, got to keep it light, because if you don't enjoy it, like, what's the point? And so, yeah, I think that's where you can find me. Instagram,
That's
YouTube.
Neptunian,
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
your Neptunian identity.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I have Neptune pretty close to my sun.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's all the places you can find me.
Okay. And
yeah.
is there anything special you're working on now, or are you seeing clients? What's going on with you?
I see. Well, right now I'm on a little bit of a vacation as I like reset my system after graduate school. But yeah, I love doing astrology readings. I love doing tarot readings. Would love to read for anyone and everyone. It is a passion. So I'm taking astrology clients. I have an astrological coaching practice where I work with people on an ongoing basis to work through what's going on in your lives, referencing the chart, placements, using magic, using, a bunch of different things, creativity, active imagination, etc., to help, get to know the planets and to work with them and to, turn obstacles into stepping stones. And I will eventually have a therapy practice, but I haven't started that yet. But yeah, if you're interested in getting a reading, learning more about your chart, just talking about astrology, hit me up and, I'd be happy to talk with you. I'm going to be on vacation until March, but you can reach out and I'm going to be seeing clients as I go.
Well, speaking of magic, are you teaching magic at all, or is that just something that you?
Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
Funny that you should ask, because I have a class that is coming up with my partner, Marlena Seven Bremner, who is a actual practicing alchemist who has written a couple books about Hermeticism and alchemy. The Hermetic Marriage of Art and Alchemy is one of them. She's published by Inner Traditions. Great author, fantastic artist, really intelligent person. She has Mercury in Capricorn, keeps me on track. But we are teaching a class called The 7 Classical Planets Through Myth, Magic, and Alchemy, which is a deep dive into each of the planets. So one planet a week. It's 2-hour lectures, hour and a half with some questions, where we look at the mythology around a planet, look at the kind of archetypes, look at the psychology. She brings in the alchemy and the relationship to alchemy. So it's a pretty comprehensive look at each one of the planets, and then there's an 8th class for integration. And so that's starting in March 1st.
Okay.
And there is a early bird discount if you sign up before the end of January. So if you are interested in learning, in hearing me talk a lot more or learning about the planets and or both, that class is starting out.
Awesome. All right. Well, as for me, I'm going to be here at COSME. So tomorrow, actually, we have a very beautiful and brilliant workshop by Marcella Kroll, who's here in the audience. It's called the Bone and Blood Journey. And if you are interested in a journey of meditation to find, I would say, is it the self-reliance or just a self-realization? What would you say, Marcella?
We're going to go to three different journeys.
Okay.
To meet with different archetypes of the self, but connected to you, either through your spiritual teams or ancestors, to get messages and guidance.
Okay, beautiful. So that's tomorrow, 12 to 2. I know some of you are signed up already that are here.
I'm so excited for this.
It's going to be good. I'm very excited too.
Shaking. I'm so excited.
Yes. So that's tomorrow, 12 to 2. If you are interested, you can go to Marcella's Instagram page or just go to COSME Astrology. There's a link in the bio if you'd like to sign up. Every Monday here at COSME, we do have yoga with Willie Cross, and that's at 6 o'clock. On Thursday nights, we have Transformational Wisdom program, which is, I don't even know how to describe it. It's a deep program. I went through it from 2028 until 2011. It's with Dr. Susan Sophia James, but basically it's really learning and understanding metaphysics and esotericism, sound healing, dream journeying, channeling, all the things. So if you're interested in that, that's Thursday nights, 5:30 to 7. Tabitha, our beautiful Tabitha, is here on the weekends. So she's here on Saturday and Sunday from 11 to 4. If you feel like shopping with us or you want to come in and have a astrological conversation or even just talk about life, Tabitha is your woman. So come in and hang out. We also have a bunch of astrology books that you can look at and do research from if you'd like to. And I am always seeing clients. So I see astrology clients, I see tarot clients. I also do some coaching. So it's a lot of empowerment coaching through astrology. So I use Saturn quite a bit, and I just really believe that we are all here for a purpose, and there is an opportunity to achieve mastery in whatever sense you want mastery to mean for you. But I do think we can master our lives if we really want to. So I do that kind of coaching. And what else? I think that's it at COSME. Yeah, Tabitha? Yeah, that's what we've got. Yeah, and we'll have more podcasts. We will get back on our once-a-month schedule, so please come see us. Oh, hello. We have sound baths 4 times a month. I'm so used to doing them. I think I just forgot it. So with Adina Diaz, she's also in the audience. We have a sound bath on the 17th and 19th and the 26th of this month. If you're interested in intentionally setting an hour for yourself to realign with your energy, to experience deep relaxation, to meditate, come to one of our sound baths. They're really beautiful. We lace in astrology, energy work. They're great. So that is it. And thank you all for being here. Thank you for supporting COSME. Thank you for supporting astrology. And thank you for supporting our work. And that is the end of the recording. Thank you so much.
Thank you.